was also called
agava eno Abazungu ebigambo byasobye dda Eno Museveni ebyebibi Kyagulanyi Ssentamu Bobi Wine kyabadde alwanirira ebbanga lyonna kimaze ne kituukirira essanyu jjerere kyemmanyi kati waali afa essanyu kubanga Abazungu balangiridde bino ebigambo byakaaye dda Eno Museveni takyalina lugendo bakambwe nnyo n'okukirawo ye lwaki mbikugamba kambakuwe obeewulirireko nga bennyini boogera ku nsonga za Eno Museveni nti ekkomo lye limaze okutuukirira tebakyamwetaaga kuddamu kulembera ggwanga Uganda.
General Pinochet. So General Museveni, please, not Mr. He is not a Mr. at all. We know that Museveni is responsible for millions of deaths just in Uganda, but also in Congo, in Rwanda, basically in every neighboring country of Uganda. Yeah, you're saying that the subject of today is this Uganda EU Business Forum, and I find that very interesting because obviously there are many of these business forums taking place, and it's really interesting to discuss what should be our attitude to this. Now, I've seen a couple of attitudes, a couple of approaches to business. The first approach is simply ignore it, and I mean ignore the fact that there are massive human rights violations in Uganda. I once called a Dutch company that does business in Uganda, and I asked them, what do you think about the human rights situation in Uganda? And they replied to me, do you really think that we can have any influence on that? And I found that reaction flabbergasting, astonishing. The fact that such a company basically says, no, we forget about human rights because we can't do anything about it anyway. Right? For me, this is a fundamental problem. Then on the other side, there are comrades that are talking about a resolute boycott of any business. And in some cases, for example, I know a couple of people on this forum think that we shouldn't even be sending money anymore to Uganda. And first of all, I find that totally, no, it doesn't work. I think when you think about actions, boycott actions, you need to find a way, something that actually works. And me not sending school fees next month for someone in Uganda, it's going to mean that someone is not going to school, but it's not going to influence the dictator at all. So it's not effective, in my humble opinion. However, telling a individual company to, for example, think about human rights, to have a human rights policy, that is something that I think is workable. When I did some research in this area, there is actually something that is called the United Nations Middle and Small Enterprise Human Rights Policy. It's probably something shorter than this, but it's basically some guidelines for any company to deal with human rights. And it starts by drafting a human rights policy for your company and including human rights in some kind of way, in the way that you handle your customers, that you handle your employees, and that you do relations with the government. And so, including human rights, when you're dealing with your employees, for example, means that you treat them better than what is normal in Uganda. We know that in many companies in Uganda, employees are treated like shit. But also in all the other aspects. For example, in government, that would mean that you do not pay any bribes, right? If you do decent business. So just for a company to start thinking about this is a major step. And so it doesn't necessarily mean that they have to stop doing business. It could, of course. I mean, if you are drafting a human rights policy and you see so many issues, then it might be that in the end, you're going to draw the conclusion that you don't want to do this investment. It really depends on the kind of business that you're in. In the Netherlands, we also have a business convention. It is called the Uganda Business Convention, not surprisingly. This was also the reason that I called that Dutch company. And these people are going to have another conference later this year. And maybe some of you remember that on Independence Day, I met some of these people. That video went viral. That guy, according to me, he is taking money from the Ugandan government through Miriam Black. Because I think that when you're organizing such a conference, that it is very difficult to do that without government participation and even government support. And when that happens, I see a fundamental problem, because then I know, because we know these people are fundamentally corrupt. And then I think we really have to have a second thought if we want to have such conferences here. Now, I don't want to make my contribution too long, but I'm really happy that also Dr. Daniel Kawuma is on this call, and Dr. Kawuma is very experienced in dealing with Uganda, and if I'm not mistaken, that he is also an entrepreneur himself, and I'm very interested to know his opinion about this, because obviously Dr. Kawuma knows, on the one hand, I know that he wants to do good things for Uganda, but how do you do that without getting dirty hands? So that is my first question for Dr. Daniel Kawuma. And now I have the opportunity, Daniel, to ask you a question. I also have another question for you. I've noticed that in the conferences that you organize, you take a very practical approach to policies. For example, I know that you've asked people to draft papers about how Uganda can function better. And you know that we had that discussion before. Personally, I think we should focus on human rights. We should focus on the genocide. And then when we have installed Bobi Wine as the president, the other things will follow. That is my personal opinion. I think all these things about even some people are saying that the pothole discussion is a diversion. So I think we should attack the government hard. We know that any policy that the NUP is drafting is not taken considered at all. So it's just wasting of time. So I think we should focus all our time on removing that dictator. And when we have removed him, then we'll start fixing education. Then we'll start fixing the hospital. Then we'll start fixing the roads. So I'm really curious to know the doctor's opinion about that. And with that, I would like to end my contribution. Back to you, Dorcas.
Thank you very much, Comrade Nico. How are you? It's Ismail.
Yeah, very good. And of course, Ismail, you're also one of the hosts of this program. I always talk about Dorcas, forgetting that there are also other people involved in this program. So back to you, Ismail.
No, for me, I prefer just being in the kitchen, as you know. Yes, Comrade Dorcas, unfortunately, she had to take an emergency call or something like that. So I'm going to take over this session until she comes back. It's always nice to see you, Dr. Nico. I know we're doing some good things in the background, and I would like to thank you for your contribution. I also saw the link of the rigged. I don't know how many people actually downloaded it, but I went on to it, and yeah, it's very good. Thank you very much. We've also got, sorry, I'm using my tablet, so it's kind of difficult to see. Dr. Daniel Kauma, nice to see you. Please unmute and then speak to us. Okay. Dr. Kauma, can you hear me?
Yes, can you give me about 5 minutes, please?
Yes, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I see Comrade Kato, you've got your hand up. Comrade Kato, please unmute and speak to us.
Thank you so much. I just want to say thank you to Nico again. You, as always, you are such a inspirational person. You are an inspirational person to us. And one of the questions I would like to ask you, last time, is it not conflicting when Eric is also trying to say we should do or have alternative government, alternative things that we do to persuade people, on top of also trying to challenge the dictator. And I know it's in a way it takes our energy and it takes most of our time as well. So is it not okay to persuade people saying this is what we're doing that is really good, and then at the same time challenge the dictator on human rights issues? And secondly, and then eventually.
I was looking for the unmute button. I found it. Yeah, I think this is brilliant. This is exactly what we need. You know, if all of us take this attitude and refuse to pay those bribes, then that is really a blow for that whole system, that mafioso system. Oh, yeah, let me start my video. My apologies. And then, by the way, let me then also put my cat here. Hello, Sammy. This is my cat. Oh, my cat doesn't want to be in the video. No. So yeah, that is. I think that is very important. We need these small kind of things of civil disobedience. The funny thing is, I call it disobedience. Actually, it's civil obedience because you're following the rules. But it's the disobedience to corruption, and that is very very important. So we should all be doing that, and definitely when I think it was Desmond, right? Desmond Cato, that when he left those officials, they surely must have had a message. Yeah, and there are many Ugandans that are willing to make a small sacrifice to make their country better. So yes, I think that is very important. That is my short reaction.
Thank you very much, Comrade. I've got Comrade Godfrey Iga. Please unmute and speak to us.
Yeah, thanks very much, Ismail and everyone. Yeah, I've had the submissions and the fight against corruption, which I've always refused to pay bribes. Yeah, because to me, I should not be doing wrong. If I've done wrong, yeah, I should pay the fine. And when you go to Uganda, the society is, I think, immune and used to getting away with just bribes rather than doing the right thing. So I should pay for the utility I use, and that I pay. Well, then you should learn to control your consumption, unnecessary on that front. Then on the next thing, you feel sorry for those chaps on the roads. They are there on controlling traffic because they are not well paid. If we look at what they are paid and their expenditure, even at a minimum, they can't be making it. Maybe I should refuse to pay the bribe and pay the penalty, and I shall give the writ I have to them to show them that there's a better way, yeah, not to ask bribe by doing the right things. And the next thing I'm rather fond of is when we've got bright ideas, maybe there's a way of passing them to our chapters so they filter through to our policymakers. Because we know NRM and the regime in general, they have no clear policies. They can't think of policies because they are too corrupt. Now, we discuss and give our good policies on social media online, and they pick them up, and they use them somewhere, and claim it's their success. But we know what we have to do. We can pass those policies. All we have to do is criticize whatever bad they are doing. And because I haven't seen anything good they are doing, I have no credit for them. So anything bad, I shall comment for them. But also we should learn to just bypass their diversions, because most of what's being discussed on social media for the past 2 weeks is pure diversion, and none of them is related to our going forward or for our liberation. That's my point for now. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Comrade Godfrey. Guys, always nice to hear from you. I see Comrade Nico is making everybody a sandwich. Comrade Dorcas, are you back?
I've been here, but
Okay.
please, it's okay to carry on. I don't know if Doctor is now ready to speak to us.
He said to give him a couple minutes. I think he will put his hand up when he's ready to speak. Captain David, nice to see you. Really nice to see you. Harriet, Linda, Mimi, Joe, nice to see you. We've also got Irene, Angela, David, Rose, Winnie, Proscovia, Mary Kay, and Modi. All nice to see you, comrades. We've got Comrade Joe. Please unmute and speak to us.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Comrade Isma, Comrade Dorcas, Dr. Nico, and all the speakers. Of course, I want to speak about the upcoming Swedish East African Chamber of Commerce. But let me first comment about bribery in Uganda, corruption in Uganda. When I still used to go to Uganda, that was like about 5 years ago, 6 years ago, thereabout. My personal conviction also is not to give a bribe. And a few times I've been arrested and I've formally refused to pay a bribe. You rather give me a ticket if you can justify that, even then. So I'll give you one specific incident. This was around Christmas time. I was driving from Kampala to Mbale late in the night. I think it was around, probably around 9 o'clock. One of the shopping centers, I I pulled to the side and was making a phone call. So I was in my car making a phone call. Suddenly, I'm surrounded by almost, I don't know, there were like 5 people, officers, and they told me I'd blocked the traffic, which was not true. One day I was speaking on the phone and I blocked the traffic, which was not true. So I told them I had pulled to the side and I was making a phone call, which should be allowed. So I contested that. So what they told me I should drive to the police station, which I had no problem with. But they wanted to get into my car and I refused. I had baggage. I had bags in the back and my laptop and stuff in the front seat. So I refused. And I told them I was going to comply. I was going to drive behind them, They refused. And I told them I had my valuables in the car that might be stolen. I told them that, which was offensive, of course. No, I told him it's not, it's common knowledge. You police steal things, So, okay, after insisting, I had one officer seated in front. So we drove. We go to the police station. What were they charging me with? Because I contested that. So they told me, I had blocked the traffic and I was speaking on my phone. Of course, no, close the door. Get out. Close the door. Thank you. I apologize. I have some guests around, so you might hear a lot of noise. Yes. So, I was held up from up to almost 4 o'clock in the morning, and I told them lock me up in the arrest cells if you like, but I'm not. So they told me I had to pay. I was going to pay. I think was it around 100,000 shillings. I had to pay to a bank, which would have required me to go back to Kampala and what have you. So they tried to create this situation that puts your life really, that makes you to consider different options. But I was still firm. I told them, give me a fine or ticket, I'm going to pay. But they told me I needed to do that when the banks would be open. So in other words, they give you so few options. So in the end, anyway, they let me go home around 5 in the morning. Already it was about Christmas time, but I was firm. And, the arresting officer left me. She went home, she said, okay, she left me with some 2 officers that they could talk to me and maybe seek a solution or come to some understanding, which to me was insinuation of giving a bribe. But I firmly refused. So, yeah. And in the meantime, I was really challenging them about this kind of behavior, this kind of corruption. So, ladies and gentlemen, that is a little mark you can make. Oh, just a minute, please.
It's all right, Joe. Joe
Yeah.
will come back. Yeah. Oh, you okay? Okay. I muted you. Sorry, Joe, please unmute. Okay.
Sorry. Sorry. So that was just one of the instances where I've had a brush with the law. But every time I've always been, arrest. They just arrest you on trumped up charges, which you can always challenge and you'll firmly refuse. So yeah, that is my little experience. Probably Dr. Kauma is ready to speak. Let me yield the mic. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Brother Joe. Yes, you'll come back later. Yes, Doctor, good to see you. For those of you that are just joining in, we welcome you to this edition of Uganda is Bleeding online protest. Yes, Dr. Daniel, please do speak to us. Thank you.
Yes, greetings everyone, and I appreciate the opportunity, and certainly appreciate what Uganda is Bleeding is doing every weekend and even during the week to raise awareness about the issues affecting our diaspora and also the struggle for change in Uganda. In the United States, this month, I think most of you must have heard, we are celebrating Black History Month. February is celebrated as Black History Month in the United States, in Canada, and also it's recognized across the world. I was actually working on a few projects that we are working on here in the United States pertaining to Black History Month, but this is the month tying into what we're discussing today that recognizes the contributions, the achievements, and history of African Americans as well as people of African descent across the world. Those of you who have followed the civil rights movement, this month is traced back to about 1926 when it started to be celebrated as Negro History Month, with the aim of educating the world about the achievements of people of African descent, with the thought process that can help empower people. It can help fight discrimination, racism around the world. So this is something which even us Africans, people from Uganda, we need to draw parallels to some of the struggles that we have seen in the civil rights movement since slavery. In particular, our struggle to fight colonialism and where we are today. And I think when you talk about issues like business summits happening around the world where not only Uganda, but African nations are dragged to capitals. You see the US-Italy summit, you see, Africa-Italy summit, you see Africa-Russia summit, you see Africa-UAE business summits. It looks like there's still a scramble for resources and the labor forces of our continent. Africa, and Uganda is bleeding, has also been key to highlighting the plight of migrant workers, where our nations have become a factory line for producing workers for the Middle East, among other places in the world. So Black History Month is something which we also should prioritize or think about as people who want change, because if you look at the trajectory of where slavery started and where we are today, it shows you what persistence can achieve, that we have to be persistent in everything we do. We have to contribute in any way that we can. We have seen civil rights icons use different approaches to address the same challenges. We have seen how Martin Luther King approached, oppression and discrimination. We have seen how Malcolm X approached discrimination. We have seen even simple acts by people who are unknown, like refusing to sit in the back of the bus, or even people like Harriet Tubman, who those of you who have studied history, was born in slavery and she escaped. But even after escaping, she went back into the slave territories to rescue other slaves into freedom. So what it highlights is that whatever act you do, it doesn't matter. You don't have to be a Martin Luther King. You don't have to be Malcolm X. You can be just somebody sitting on the back of the bus and you say, I'm not going to take that anymore. You can be somebody who is discriminated against and you say, I'm not going to take back that anymore. And when we are fighting for liberation in Uganda, it has to be a collective effort. It's not going to be achieved only by our leaders of the National Unity Platform or FDC or any of the other opposition political parties. It has to be a collective effort for all Ugandans. We all have to own this as the people who want change in Uganda. So I just wanted to highlight that, especially as we are in February. And when we look at Uganda, where in my opinion, we didn't really achieve true independence. It was just the passing of the baton from one colonial master to the next. And in fact, that's why many Ugandans today say they are still fighting for liberation and freedom, because we did not receive true independence. We are still dependent on a new colonial master. And this time it's not the colonial masters we had, but somebody doesn't hear me. Do you hear me clearly? Someone is saying my voice is not coming through clearly. Can you hear me, Dorcas?
We hear you.
Yes. So
Yes, we do.
yeah, so it was just the changing of the baton from one colonial master to Museveni right now, who is our colonial master in Uganda. And I would like to highlight an initiative that we saw this week in Uganda, pioneered by the National Unity Platform. I have to talk about this issue, where the party was raising back to school resources to support the children of victims of human rights violations, children of victims of abduction and forced disappearances, such as the children of John Bosco Chibalama, and the children of detentions, such as Olivia Lutaya, among other colleagues of hers who are still undergoing indefinite detention. So the National Unity Platform was raising resources, school supplies to support these children. I commend the work that was being done towards that effort. The NUP US chapter is also committing this term to pay for school fees for 40 students. And I encourage other comrades around the diaspora to support this cause in any way you can. There are so many. I was talking to the Secretary General of the NUP, David Lewis, and he was telling me the magnitude, the number of children that need and families that need support because they are being caught up in the Museveni atrocities and human rights violations. So there are many people who are suffering and struggling. So let's not leave them behind. Let's support them. In the US, if you want to support this cause, you can always go to diasporanup.org. We have a donation link where you can donate towards this initiative, but we have already committed to paying tuition and school fees for 40 students this coming term. So I just thought that I talk about some of these initiatives because they show where we are, that at this point, we shouldn't even been talking about supporting children going back to school when their parents are sitting in jail for 3 years for committing no crimes and they are innocent. So we need to continue to advocate, like most of the prior speakers have said, for the release of political prisoners in Uganda so that they can go and take care of their families, they can take care of their children. That's an alarm we need to continue sounding loudly from the perspective of the diaspora. Dr. Nico raised a few questions in his submission about how we can do business in Uganda and the dictatorship, and that's the dilemma we run into, especially when you go to lobby the State Department and some of the other organizations that are doing work in Uganda. For instance, you can go to the US government and you tell them, stop sponsoring the dictatorship. But some of the initiatives they're doing. And of course, we can debate about these issues, whether they enable the dictatorship, such as funding for healthcare initiatives such as PEPFAR, where they provide medications for HIV. We have the cancer treatment, and among other things, where some of the work is humanitarian work in nature. And of course, when you come and say cut off aid and some of these issues, it's a debate which sometimes can be challenging for us to focus on ways in which we can separate the dictatorship from some of the initiatives which are positively, in fact, impacting the lives of Ugandans on the ground. But to address the issue raised by Dr. Nico, what we usually encourage businesses is to engage in ethical business practices. And I think this point has been echoed by some of the speakers, by not engaging in bribery or trying to work around the system, which has been really the issue that we see in Uganda today. So that's something which we encourage businesses to do that are doing in Uganda. One other part we can do is supporting civil society. There are many civil society organizations that need funding in Uganda that are doing tremendous work on the ground, humanitarian work, that are addressing the human rights atrocities. Some of the organizations that are representing the political prisoners. So those are some of the things which people doing business in Uganda can support and join the struggle, because sometimes, like Dr. Nico mentioned, it can be overwhelming. You see, what can we do? How can we remove someone who has been in power for 38 years? But it's through those small acts that can make an impact on the ground. So ethical business practices, supporting civil society, and of course, they can engage in diversity and inclusion in the workplace. We know, of course, our women in Uganda are still struggling, and we need to achieve full equality and emancipation of the girl, engage in diversity and inclusion, making sure that job opportunities are not available just for the privileged, but also Ugandans who are struggling to make ends meet, equal opportunity for all. And of course, speaking out against injustice. It doesn't matter if you are part of, Dr. Nico was the issue of the conferences that we organize in the diaspora. And definitely I hear his concerns that the focus should be on removing the dictator and not much time spent on other issues, which he classified as distractions. In my experience, one of the meetings we attended with the president at the State Department, one of the questions that came up was, how are you going to manage the Uganda economy differently from what Museveni is doing? So when we are doing advocacy in some of these places, people want to know what the struggle stands for, how they are going to run Uganda differently from the dictatorship. And that's usually sometimes the trap we find ourselves in, because Museveni sometimes is branded as a stabilizer and someone who is competent by some of these Western governments. So we face the challenge that we have to also show that we are competent. And there's no better way to show you are competent than articulating policies and ways in which you're going to change and impact the lives of Uganda differently from what Museveni is doing. So I really strongly believe that we need to find the right balance between advocating for change in Uganda and also making sure that we are a competent group that shows that if given power, we're going to actually improve some of the things we complain about, that we're going to improve the healthcare sector, that we have people who are competent and understand the healthcare system and how to fix the problems that they are seeing in Uganda. We need to have people who are competent at managing the education sector. You can't say the education is broken and it's not addressing the needs of Ugandans without offering solutions. We have to be competent in managing, understanding foreign policy and insecurity in the region. Museveni goes and tells these people that he's the only one who can secure the East African region. So you have to be able to challenge those policies and the arguments he's making to the Western governments. And for me, it's one of the reasons why we try to challenge our diaspora. When we organize these conferences and I invite speakers and we tell our own diaspora that you need to write paper presentations, because I want to challenge our brothers and sisters to go home and sit down and actually think about the issue that we advocate for. We can't just always just say we want the dictator to leave, to go, and we take over without being prepared. So part of this is to make sure that we build the capacity of ourselves, our leaders. Many of us come to the diaspora, we are not skilled in human rights advocacy, we are not skilled in running governments, we're not skilled in some of these other things which we want to change in Uganda. So getting that culture of doing research and being able to present our ideas in a competent manner, I believe, is very effective in making a better advocacy for change and advocates for change. And even when you go to the offices and you knock to the doors of some of the stakeholders in the diaspora, if someone works in the World Bank and we need to go to the World Bank and challenge them about the activities going on in Uganda, we have to be able to challenge the World Bank competently on their development projects in Uganda to highlight how they are not helping the people and instead helping the dictatorship. So you need to really be competent on the activities of the World Bank in Uganda. You have to be competent in some of the foreign aid initiatives going towards healthcare. So these aspects that we're talking about to empower our people, Dr. Nico, among others who have raised these issues. So we have to find the right balance between the advocacy as well as building the capacity of our comrades in the diaspora. So thank you so much for this opportunity. I wish all of you a great weekend and happy Black History Month and our best wishes with the rest of the deliberations.
Thank you.
For more hands, James, Reggie, and Comrade Iga. Yes, Dr. Nico, I think you had some feedback. Dr. Daniel, we thank you for your submission, and we thank you, of course, for your leadership. We thank you for all that you continue to do with, of course, our president and all the leadership at NUP. We thank you. We thank you so much. And just to remind the comrades, you all have chapters where you can contribute in case you're struggling to find the link. However, you can email us and we'll forward you to the right place. Otherwise, contact your chapter leaders to make contributions to the good cause that NUP is doing. Thank you so much, Dr. Daniel. Yes, Dr. Nico, if you come in just briefly, and then we'll take a couple more hands. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Dorcas. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Yes. So I want to thank Dr. Daniel for his response, and I think it should also be noted the important role that he is fulfilling in stability for the diaspora. We know in Uganda there is a lot of chaos. In the diaspora, we also had a little bit of chaos, but since Dr. Daniel Kabuma was installed a bit more than a year ago, things have been relatively quiet. And therefore, I hope, Daniel, that you will stay diaspora leader as long as possible. So that one is my reaction to Dr. Daniel Kabuma. And then what I wanted to say, I think if there are issues to discuss, and I think this is for us as the diaspora, but also for our parliamentarians, I think there are two issues that we should always focus on, and those are, first of all, elections, and secondly, human rights. Those two. And why am I saying this? I think it was on the first day that there was a Twitter space with the theme of the Electoral Commission. And our Secretary General, David Lewis, was also invited to speak there. Also, Paul Buchanan, spokesperson of the Electoral Commission, was there. And David Lewis clearly says it all starts with elections. Just to give you the problem, for example, we have a lot of problems with judges in Uganda. And why do we have a problem with the judiciary? In a normal functioning democracy, the judges are appointed by different leaders, different presidents. So Trump, he has appointed in the US 3 judges on the Supreme Court, but only 3. Otherwise, there definitely would be an issue. Bush has appointed some, Clinton has appointed some, Obama has appointed some. This causes balance. And so these term limits, they are fundamental. When if that term limit was removed in the USA, it would also cause issues. Since the dictator has removed the presidential term limits, everything starts to fall down. The judges, they are now only appointed by the dictator, and therefore they protect the dictator. And the same holds for the Electoral Commission. The Electoral Commission are only appointed by the dictator. Therefore, they are not an electoral commission anymore. They are an appointee commission. They appoint the same dictator. And
ebyo nno wetutudde abazungu basazeewo okwenyigira mu nsonga eno okukwatirako bannayuganda tusobole okulaba nga tujjawo dictator nakyemalira General Yoweri Kaguta Museveni. Guno mulimu gwaffe bagamba omukwana talina mukamwana yeekamwana yekka. Kati bwe tuba nga tufunye abazungu nga bano Dr. Nico n'abalala abalina ebyokukola naye ne basala bagamba bakwatireko bannayuganda babiri wamu ne bannayuganda bagayidinge babalengezeeyo ku bye tulina okukola okujjako nakimala General Kaguta Museveni bannaye ne wano badde ng'ositukiramu ne tukwatira wamu ekintu kino okwetaasa ogoba nakimala General Kaguta Museveni tusobole okutereeza eggwanga lyaffe tusobole okutereeza ensi yaffe ate nga kisoboka era kijja kusoboka Uganda yaffe nejja kutereera singa tunassa kimu ne tumanya nti ekimala nno kimala tulina ffe kusitukiramu ne tutereeza Uganda eno Uganda ejja kutereera General Museveni ejja mutala kaguddeyo kiyumba anaagwa era Uganda ejja kufuna eddembe.